Hi, and welcome to the Prism of Perspective podcast. I am so excited today to introduce you to one of my favorite people on the planet, Katherine Schneewind. And we go way back. We worked together and had a study group with financial planning and with Northwestern Mutual way back when. But Katherine is now the founder and CEO of her own private wealth firm called HighNote Wealth, and she brings over 27 years of experience in financial planning to this practice. She opened it up with her great brother, Michael, and they do it. He's a CFA, and they do some tremendous work really helping with families, making sure that the people feel like they're part of the family. It's a boutique approach, and they've done a tremendous job. She's married to Randy Schneewind, and together they are raising a family, and her son, Remington, who's got a really interesting educational experience because they thought it was really important to expand what's possible. So living in Minnesota, they actually have him in a school with Chinese immersion. So you can see that she's really trying to expand his perspective. So when we think about Prism of Perspective, thinking about how are you really seeing the world from that perspective as well. She's been a great contributor for a long time back to the community. And so she's a board member in the Berg Group and Schneewind Family Foundation and Entre Bank. And she continues to give back to the community in so many ways. Very interested in different types of work with women, working obviously to support women who have experienced with violence, women violence, the Animal Humane Society, and the University of Minnesota. Other thing that's really cool is she has a background in music. She was a country music singer, and she has a great background in that. And she's also, thought I was pretty fantastic, we'll talk about this a little bit later, an Ironman finisher. So you can see that she's done a lot in her life. And that's what I really want to be able to share with you is how she has used, the way that she frames her beliefs, her belief system, where they come from, how she captures so much energy in order to be able to do the things she does, and how she stays present for her life, regardless of all the different things that are going on, so that she can continue to optimize her life. So anyway, that's my great friend, Katherine. And so welcome. How are you doing, girl?
Oh, thank you, John. I'm great. I'm so humbled and honored and really happy to be here today talking to you and sharing thoughts on Prism of Perspective. This is great. Thanks.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. So what the framing that we like to do is really look at different big areas in your life, big pivot moments where you look at something and say, wow, this was a big challenge, or this was a direction that I took that really made a big impact. And then kind of think about how do the different elements of the Prism of Perspective, how were they playing in your world? How were maybe the beliefs really serving you or maybe not serving you? What were you doing to generate energy, or, maybe what could have been great in those areas? And so let's look at some of the really big areas that are important to you that maybe really made a big shift. And we have a background of working together for quite some time. And one of the times when we were working together, you had built up a great practice with Northwestern Mutual that before you went out and branched out on your own, and you were really one of the top performers there. In fact, if memory serves me right, you were the first female ever to reach Pathfinder level, which is really an indication of really well-diversified practice, a planning practice that sought to bring a diversified approach into that business. And at that time, while you had that thriving practice, you also ended up finding out that you were pregnant with child, as was intended. And then it was a little more challenging than you had anticipated. And that might be a curveball that, I'm thinking back on that might be interesting for you to reflect upon. Is that an area that would be fun for you?
Sure. That's going back 14, almost 15 years. And yeah, it's as clear as day. It could have been yesterday. It literally seems like, and that was a really, it's interesting, John. I listened to you share these just delightful, lovely, nice things that you say about me, and yet there's been some real forks in the road for me in my life, as there all are for all of us. And you look back on them, and it's so fun to share and think about like how you got through those times, because, it wasn't easy. Yeah, I'm happy to share, I gave birth to my son at 7 months and 1 day. He was a 3-pound cucumber that I gave birth to. He was so small. And it was December of 2008. in August of 2008 was the beginning of the very rapid and sudden decline in the stock market for those of us who were around in 2008-9. And so I had this premature infant that, had a lot of issues. And then he, in addition to that, had some other complicated health issues. And it really kind of forced my hand to take 5 entire months off and be completely present with him when I had this kind of, green and growing wealth management practice during the worst crisis in our time for sure, and a premature child. And it created a ton of anxiety and caused me to need to really shift my belief system in myself, the stories I was telling myself, and go from being kind of at the bottom of that prism of perspective to try to work my way up.
Can I jump in for just a second? Because I think it's even important to remember that my recollection is even prior to Remington's birth, your pregnancy was quite challenging as well.
Yeah, very, very challenging. Yeah, I had a lot of issues.
It wasn't like your 7 months were like you showed up, right? So you were working through that.
Every gas station between Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, the first 16 weeks. So the first 4 months were pure hell. And then I had preeclampsia, so I had really serious blood pressure issues. So I was in and out of the hospital. I had just a lot of problems. So yeah, it was not a joyful experience. So you're right. I think that's a great memory. Thank you.
Oh, I thought I'd bring you back to that. Everyone wants to remember getting sick, right?
Yeah. And it was leading up to that. It was keeping my mind set.
Right.
It was a challenge to keep my mindset positive for those 7 entire months leading up to the 5 months off, leading up to the greatest recession in our time and all of that. So yeah, it was a really challenging time.
So let's talk about how you were able to shift, right? Because just as a reflection back on Prism of Perspective, the idea is that we have identity beliefs that we've developed over time that kind of inform us about who we are, how we show up, things along those lines. We also have beliefs about how other people are going to show up and how the world is going to show up. And all of a sudden you have all these different events that are probably yanking on beliefs that you had that may have allowed you to create what you'd already created. But you got to be really solid in those. And even the most solid beliefs begin to be a little shaky, as wave after wave after wave comes and hits you. Tell me a little more about how that was feeling for you.
Okay. I really appreciate that because you're right. At that stage, I was 13 years or so into the business, and I had experienced some success and was feeling confident. I have a music degree from my past life, and I, didn't have maybe as much confidence as I needed coming into the business, but I gained that kind of quickly. But over the course of that, 10, 11, 12, 13 years, I had done all right. I had done quite well, and I felt great. It was staggering to me. Staggering is the word. How quickly insecurities can pop back up as if I was the person who had accomplished nothing in 13 or 14 years. My clients would all leave me, is what it felt like.
Yep.
Not just because of the economic recession. It was more that was just another additive in the blender of a whole series of bad ingredients. But it was that I was a woman and that I was pregnant and I needed to take 5 entire months off. And how are clients going to ever accept that? And how are they going to not compare me to a man that would never have to take 5 months off? And, and not jump ship and go to a different advisor at that time.
And you're taking that time off at a time when, right. Taking that time off at a time when a lot of people are having financial insecurities because of what's going on in their own world. Right. And so that at the time that it's all kind of, the perfect storm, right?
Yes, it was the perfect storm.
It was a perfect storm. And so you're getting rocked a little bit to your core. Talk about what you were able to do to bring yourself back, because you did come back pretty quickly, right? You bounced back out of that really in a powerful way. Had to be able to shift the confidence is shaky, but no way you bounce back as rapidly as you do without finding your footing and you're reconnecting with your confidence. So talk about the things that you were able to do to give you that.
Yeah. A couple of things. It's kind of, the one thing in my life that I will take credit for, that I think I'm really, really good at, is reaching out for a lifeline when I need it.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm as good for others that need that lifeline. But for me at the time, I knew I was weak. I knew I was vulnerable. I knew I was spinning and going into a maze in my mind of my clients are anxious, I'm anxious, the market's anxious. And so I knew that it was imperative that I start building a different way to think over the course of that time period. I also have enough life experience to know that you can't necessarily do that without building good habits,
right,
and creating a path to get there where you are consistent over a reasonable period of time to do it. So, I have to say, I point to a couple of very specific things. Reaching out to my most amazing life coach in the world, which happened to you at the time.
Thank you for that.
Saying, John, I am effed. Or whatever. I don't know if we can swear on the podcast, but I was like,
we can. I like to, actually.
So, John, I'm in a world of hurt here. Like I'm mentally spinning. I need to be talking to you on a consistent basis. Will you please help me change the way I think? So that was one huge thing. Also, at that time in my life, you kind of talk like about our study group and a core group of really close peers and friends. And I can point to some of the best people in the entire world that helped me through that period of time, that believed in me, that tampered those voices, that I made a point of reaching out to. So it wasn't just, I'm having my worst day, can you help me? It was, let's be consistent.
Right.
And then I
built a support. You had built a support group a lot because you're such a giver, right? So I'm going to give you that. You are, you ask if you're there for people, you are absolutely there for people. And because of that, you have this reciprocity, right? This emotional bank account built up with a lot of people. And then you had the courage and the wisdom to say, guys, I need your help right now. This is a time that I need it. Let's do it consistently. And we'll talk a lot about habits. And that's a really cool one as it relates to like positive psychology basics. Like, what are you doing to make sure that you stay really strong mentally? And so many of us so ignore this too, but it's so clear that the physical part of it, exercise, nutrition, that you got to go be consistent with those. But the same thing is true is what are you doing to make sure that your psychology is good? Which is even more important, because if your psychology is good, you're probably not going to show up at the gym, right?
No,
so good for you. And then the other thing I'll throw out just to think about it from this perspective is that you have a belief in people, right? So we talked about beliefs in self, identity belief, and then you have belief of others. And so your belief in others is so strong, it seems as if, right, that you had this idea, like, I know that when I reach out, I've poured into others, and I know that there's a support group that I can go back to. And so that you look at that, so many people feel they have to do it on their own, and you were aware, no, I can't do it on my own. I don't want to do it on my own. That's what I heard you say.
It's so interesting you say that, because I think to all the like listeners and viewers out there that, I think every one of us has been at a certain point in life where you've realized or had an awareness around the fact that who you are surrounding yourself with could arguably be the most important thing in your entire life. And it's drawing like healthy boundaries around people that aren't, you're not finding let's call it a fair value exchange. And nothing's ever fair and equitable at all times, but throughout the course of a season of a relationship, it's making sure you're there for each other and helping. And I think one of the things that I have always been focused on has been having deep, deep, meaningful relationships, not with a ton of people in volume, but with really meaningful relationships, so that I can really contribute and add value to that person's life, and they can to mine as well. Mm-hmm. And to your point, not to use financial terms, but I'd made some deposits, or at least hopefully I had, and then I felt like it was time to take a withdrawal. Like, guys, I'm in trouble. I'm spinning. I'm going down. And it's kind of like, you're really at that point in life, you need to be with people who believe in you, can help set you straight, keep your mental health on track. But if you don't have the vulnerability, and I say this especially to some of the men in your audience, because it is harder, I believe, to be vulnerable for men for some reason. But it's like, if you can get yourself to be vulnerable and say, I need some help. I am struggling. Today is a rough day. This has been a rough season. You won't believe what will open up in your life. And every single human being has those struggles and goes through those seasons or those periods, whether they're big or small. So I think it was so important. My friends, my colleagues, a close group of people really helped me get through it. And I had the courage to reach out. I had the courage to be vulnerable. I had the courage to share. And over the course of time, it really changed the way I saw things. And I mean, I got all the way from, I'm going to lose my clients. It's doomsday. People are going to leave me because they're going to be dissatisfied that my timing was poor, not, out of my control, that I had this big life event during the worst economic crisis of our time. But I got all the way, John, from there, which is true victim mentality. And I really believe that at one point, all the way to actually, maybe this is the very reason that clients would stay with me and work with me and want someone at the helm or want me to be their co-pilot in life, because I am a human being. I'm compassionate. I'm empathetic. I develop good habits. I communicate, and I go through very human things, and I'm relatable.
Right. I'm
and
real.
I got all the way from one way to the other over the course of a few months to believe, no, I'm going to come back. Damn it. I'm going to come back. I'm going to qualify for one of the top awards at the company at the time. I've got 7 months to do it. It normally, that would have felt like an impossible feat. Like, I need 12 months to do it. I'll be lucky if by the skin of my teeth I do it. Now I was like, okay, you know what? Why don't I just say, let's go all in? And by the way, I still had at that time, then it would have been like a 4 or maybe 5 pound baby. I was 5 months old. That was still vulnerable and needed help. And I remember at that time, I was like, I'm going to start, this is going to be the beginning of me taking every single Friday off for the rest of this child's life. So I'm not only going to do this and accomplish this goal in 7 months, I'm going to do it on 4 days a week. And I did it. And I attribute it entirely to shifting the way that I thought, from fear to belief that I could do it. And you were a big part of that. My friends, my closest peers were. I thank everyone that helped me through that difficult time in my life. I try to give back to those that need it as well in return. But yeah, it was quite a landmark. Yeah,
it was incredible. It was great to be a part of that and to watch that happen, and is to see the impact that had, and really the shifting from like a confidence of a belief to a knowing. Right, you had kind of demonstrated that who I am is really just a continued expression of who I am, self-expression and engagement in the world. And by doing this, you add a lot of value, right? And because of that, people are going to continue to be attracted. And so it becomes less of something like, I wonder how this is happening, or how is this sustainable? Like, of course this is sustainable. This is the natural consequence of living and engaging with people in this way. And like you talked about courage and vulnerability, you had to be willing to not put up a facade or pretend everything was great. And that's so important for so many people. Like you said, maybe men more, but even, so many people are trying to, fake it till they make it. But what they're doing is they're really disconnecting from their authenticity in order to present a facade to the world, rather than everybody recognizes, when somebody's truly vulnerable, they're so attractive. If you think about people that are, the characters that are attractive are people that are real and authentic. And, we think, wow, I'm really attracted to that, but nobody would be attracted if I was vulnerable. I have to be, the Rock at Gibraltar. Right. Yeah, I'm really attracted when someone else opens up and is real.
Why do I do that? Why do I do that? But we do.
Yeah, it is incredible. And then what I think the gift that you walk away with is knowing that, when I don't have to be anything other than what I am. I do have to show up and bring effort to the world to express who I am, but I'm not trying to, like, the idea, remember the statue of Michelangelo, and they asked, how did you carve him into the marble? And he's like, I didn't carve him into the marble. He was in the marble. I took everything else off. I brought him out. And so in many ways, our lives, it's so many people are like, what do I need to add to me? I'm going to add this and that and the other, instead of really leaning into, no, I'm going to show up and be real and I absolutely have to bring my best effort. I can't not bring effort, but I can bring my true self. Another great quote I heard was, so many times people are questioning whether they should show up as their best self or their true self without recognizing that they're one and the same. Right. And so when you think about it, you're like, the idea that you're going to try to manufacture a better version of yourself than your authentic self is kind of nutty, but so.
And John, I want to say something here for anybody else out there that can relate to anything I'm saying today. But, it was kind of like when I got into the business, the financial planning business, and I got into the business, here I come with my little college music degree tucked under my armpit, like, oh, I'm a country and rock and roll singer and whatever. And give me a shot in the stock market and financial planning advice, insurance and all those things. And, at the end of the day, I remember thinking, how am I going to tell clients that I don't have a business degree? I mean, I'm 23 years old. I was the first woman out of 150 men at the firm in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1996. How am I going to tell people that, because they're going to ask, do you have an MBA? And I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I've got a music degree, but I remember trying to manufacture and trying to write a script to just practice avoidance with that topic. And I started doing it, recording it and practicing it. And I was like, every ounce of my gut instinct was firing that this is just not going to go well for me if I try to pretend to be who I'm not.
Right.
So I need to just tell people point blank, like, not only do I have a music degree, and I am enthusiastic, passionate, and willing to learn and do anything it takes to be successful in this business and help you and add value to your life. And I'm also connected to some of the greatest people who already have the knowledge that we can partner together to create it. But I became exactly who I was. And I do think that very, very reason is what got me off to a fast start. And for the same exact reason, repeated 13 or 14 years later, when I had my son, I remember walking the stairs in the hospital, like 48 hours after I had my child, and thinking, okay, when I start calling these clients, I am not even going to mention that I had the baby or had the baby 2 months early, or that I'm on maternity leave. I'm not even going to mention it. I am just going to go straight into, what are your concerns? How are you feeling? Let's talk about the market. And I remember trying that on for size. I was walking up and down stairs in this, I was going 6 flights up, 6 flights down the hospital. And I remember it so well. And I was like, Katherine, you're doing exactly what you were trying to do 13 or 14 years ago. Be who you're not. Right. Why don't you vulnerably share with the clients? This is how you were made. You were made to be a woman. You wanted to have this child. This was all part of the plan. And while you're vulnerable, that gives them a chance to be honest that they're feeling vulnerable and insecure right now too. And actually, there's no doubt for me that is the exact reason that I came back and in 7 months accomplished that big goal in basically half the time, because my clients felt attached to me. They felt they could be vulnerable. They could share with me how scared they were. And new prospects and new people that were considering working with me could as well, where they felt they had to keep up a facade. Right. Let's say they're big financial advisor. They're too scared to ever ask any dumb questions. With me, they knew they could ask anything, and I would never treat it as small. And so it was getting over that hump of truly being myself, being vulnerable and honest, instead of trying to be somebody I wasn't.
I love that. And that is, so great to be able to lean in. And I think when you talked about courage and vulnerability, Brene Brown talks a lot about that. And she's done some work in the area of vulnerability, and she's working with the military, and guys are like you said, guys are often, you can't be vulnerable. And she's like, well, tell me about a time where you were really courageous, where vulnerability wasn't an element. Right. And so the idea is that for us to really lean in, we have to really show up authentically. Otherwise it doesn't really work. So that's cool looking at how beliefs impacted all that. What I wanted to also talk about, because another area, we're going to make a little pivot here. It's kind of hard. But one of the other things that was kind of cool that you did, and this was something that was really amazing, is you had a goal all your life to do Ironman, which is, an amazing physical feat. And there were events that were going on in your life there as well that kind of made that a little tougher for you to take on. And so I think I want to talk about that. And then also, how have those kind of habits of caring for yourself physically and things along those lines generated the energy for you to continue to open up your own firm and do the things that you've done since then. So I did ask a bunch of questions, but let's just go back to the time of when you're training for the Ironman and what's going on in your beliefs and also like some of the practices that were really helping you thrive.
Yeah, I think I signed up for that adventure. It was a childhood dream, but it was something that I knew would be close to impossible for me to do, or would be a real stretch. And I wanted to see if I could do it. It was something I said, I wanted to see if I want to find out what I'm made of. And if I can actually push through the discipline and the pain to accomplish a goal like that, being an average athlete, not being a pro athlete, right? And so I took 2 years where I went part-time at work and trained 40 hours a week to get there. And unfortunately, 4 months before the actual race, I had we'll call it a very interesting life event, an accident that put me in the hospital at that time. And I had my friends and my family and everyone around me. But I, once again, John, found myself very, very quickly in the victim mentality of the prism, which is the bottom, the kind of red area where, again, felt very much so victimized. I felt that my dreams of being an Ironman and everything I'd worked for almost 2 years to get to that start line, just to get to the start line to participate, were being ripped out from underneath me. I'm not sure I can recover from what I'm going through enough now to get to the point where I can even compete. And
so I'm going to jump in for just a second, because I think that this great. You're talking about the victim piece. So the thing that we hear there, right, is that victimhood is really feeling that in a large way that the locus of control is outside of you, right? Rather than having an internal locus of control, I'm in control of my life, it's outside. And so even the way you talk about this is being taken from me, right? And so how important it is to be able to look at our lives and recognize that, yeah, there's circumstances that are absolutely going to influence and make you pivot. And, just like you're going down a whitewater rafting thing, you're not going down, it's not a pool. There's definitely, you have to read the water. But at the end of the day, the guy that makes it down the whitewater raft, he wasn't luck. And it wasn't something he just said, I'm just gonna kind of wing it. You have to say, I'm in control. I can respond, right? I have the ability to respond. Here's something that comes up. I'm going to respond to it. And as you buy that back into yourself, you move out of that victim mentality and you get back into a place like, I'm in control. Right. I'm going to influence this, and not tight control like this, but influence. And over time, the influence actually does almost give you that tight control because there's so many different ways to weave to get there.
So it's that the rapids example is a really good example. I love that example, but I think you're right. It's knowing that and that's what really the prism of perspective is all about. It's formulating good habits over time that you can control. It's somewhat the serenity prayer of life, if you will, where, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change and the courage to change the things I can. Because at that point, then it was, for me, again, it was kind of amazing, again, perplexing, baffling. It was a gobsmack basically to be in that point in life where I was like, I can just like that go right back to not believing in myself again and thinking that the world's against me. And why did this happen to me now? And how am I going to do this? And it's just amazing how quickly that can come in. and I think that's just fact-based evidence in the fact that negative thoughts can be so much more powerful than positive thoughts. And that's why working on the positive thinking and changing your core belief system, creating muscle memory by doing making the right patterns of surrounding yourself with the right people, studying things like the prism of perspective and getting in good habits. It helps you understand, no, I am in control. I can instantly today, right now, change the way I'm thinking about this. I can get help with this by calling my pastor, my rabbi, my life coach, my best friend, my peers, my most trusted people who've been vulnerable with me in their life, because they'll understand it when I am vulnerable with mine. And we can work through this together. And I get in this habit of slowly shifting to get as far up the rainbow of the prism as I possibly can. And so I think it's that, and every time life throws you a really major curveball. I believe when you deliberately and intentionally create the awareness that you need to be vulnerable, that you are struggling, that you are human, and you choose to build your life around changing that, it does get easier. It does get better. And I remembered, just again, to go back to these pins, that, when I had my son Remington, it was like, then when I was walking those stairs at the hospital, I was like, wait a minute, just a minute. 13 years ago, you tried to do this to yourself by pretending you didn't have a music background, and you want to pretend you had a business degree you didn't have. And how did that work out? It worked really well when you were yourself. Then I had this event with Remington. Then fast forward 10 years later, I had the event, in my life with one of the biggest goals that I kind of wanted to accomplish. And I had to remind myself, Katherine, the quicker you reach out, the quicker you throw the buoy and ask for help, the quicker you start changing the way you think, you're going to have a chance at doing this.
Right.
And it's detaching from the outcome and absolutely controlling what you can control one day at a time.
I love that. And I'm going to go back to the what you talked about, the serenity prayer. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. You probably are. Mark Goulston wrote a book called Just Listen. And he has this 5-step process where he says everybody can go from oh shit to okay in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But world-class people can do that in a couple of minutes. And the way that he talks about it, he says, so he goes, you don't want to deny, like when the event happened, you don't want to go, oh, I'm really happy this happened, right? That's because you don't believe it. So you need to go be honest with yourself. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't want that to happen. And then the next one is, oh God. And I use the serenity prayer there. I go, oh God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think too many people just listen to the first part of that. Like, right?
Yep.
Nothing I can do. I accepted it. I, did it. And then you're like, well, I think there were a couple other parts there. And so, the courage to do the thing, to engage and control the things I can. And then he says, and you want to look at it, and yeah, it's not what you were looking for, but it's probably not as bad as you think. And so he's like, just OGs. Because how bad can OGs be? And then he's like, and then you kind of have to dive in and lean into acceptance, right? So you have to accept whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Like, you're not going to accept reality, right? You're going to pretend something different was going on, or this isn't your, so whatever it is, whatever's going on, got to lean in, just, okay. Right. So, well, this is what happened. And then, okay, I'm going to start moving forward. Then another friend of mine said, well, what about the 6th one? And I was like, well, I read the book. There was only 5. And he goes, no, the 6th one. It's like, oh yeah. Which I thought was great. Right. Yeah. And so you look at it and say, that's about processing. It's thinking about how the brain works. Right. And so you're in fear, like you talked about, the negative is always so really quick. This real thing. It's so fast. It gets there before the positive. Before you get a chance to reframe it, you are going to react. And so you have that little reaction. And then you start to work your way up from the limbic region, which is all emotional, into the prefrontal cortex, where you start to make real good decisions. And it's a little process. But if you build in the habit of having those little 5 steps, so when something happens, you're like, oh, I don't know. Well, how do you work your way back? How do you, at some level, that's about the last piece, right? Presence. How do you have the presence so that when something happens, you have self-awareness, right? Self-control, empathy, and influence is that what really sits on that frame. And it's about being able to expand the space between stimulus and response so that you can take that moment or those couple of moments to walk your way through that and then be able to really respond rather than react and let go of the victimhood. Yeah, something did happen, but I'm not a victim. I'm in control. I'm going to recreate this scenario. So I get on that starting line and I get this goal that I've been working so hard for, right?
Yeah, that is exactly it. And I think, it's an art. It's an art. It's a life art. It's understanding that and accepting the fact that there isn't a finish line. You don't ever really get to a point in this lifetime, I don't think, where you give yourself the high five that, oh, I accomplished it all. I've got everything, no matter what.
But you give yourself a bunch of high fives along the way, I think, right? A lot of them along the way. Yeah.
And you take those kind of nuggets and this is the story that comes to mind for me with that, John, that you, in what you just described was, at one point in my career being one of the very few women, at least at the time, and still today, a minority in what we do in the world of financial planning. I remember there was someone who, a gentleman who very blatantly disrespected me and said some really inappropriate things. And I got really fired up and instantly like hot. I wasn't even seeing red, I was seeing white. And I will remember one of my best friends and people in the entire world looked at me dead in the eye, paused and said, "Bless his heart." And I remember thinking, you're right. Like, I can instantly see it that way. Right. Like, oh, how silly and naive this person was. That doesn't need to reflect on me. That has nothing to do with me.
That has nothing.
I don't need to be a victim. I don't need to be a victim of the comment. I can instantly move up to be like a collaborator or contributor or somewhere in the back where I go, you know what, bless his heart. That must have come from his really disturbed background or whatever. And we're going to move on and I'm going to control what I can control. But to this day, like, I can't have anything like happen in my life where it could be somebody that runs into me with a grocery cart in the grocery store. And I instantly think of my friend and think, bless his heart. I don't need to get upset about this, you know.
There's a book I recently read that I really liked called 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And one of the 15 commitments is I commit to seeing everyone and everything as an ally. And so what you're talking about there is it's even going a little bit beyond bless his heart, but almost like bless his heart. And this is so great for me because, like you said, now somebody runs into you in the grocery, the back of your heels in the grocery car. Yeah. Because you had that moment, he was an ally because you had an experience that shifted the way you were seeing things, and it helped you grow. It's like being at the gym. It's about being at the emotional gym and the relational gym, so that when stuff happens in our lives, if we just look at it and say, there's a lesson, there is something, we can always respond, right? So the beginning of the 15 commitments is 100% responsibility. And when a lot of people hear that, I think what they hear is like, I should blame myself, right? So something happened, therefore I'm 100% responsible. I shift the way I think about that. No, it means you're 100% response able. Like whatever happens, you can respond from that spot. You are 100% response able. Right? And so you look at it from there and then you go, okay, stuff happens. Well, if nothing happened, you wouldn't have a gym. You wouldn't have this gym where you're growing. But this person disrespects you, and all of a sudden you have this opportunity to say, wow, somebody can say something really hurtful about me, and I recognize it's actually not about me. And therefore, the next time something happens, or you're just so much stronger, just like if you were lifting weights, you're lifting emotional weights.
It's exactly like that. And it's kind of like, I want to encourage anyone, again, listening, and you've taught me this so well, John. There is an opportunity to practice these ways of thinking all the time. It does not take something massive, catastrophic to hit you upside the head to say, wow, I really, really need to dig in and like kind of radically change my life. To this day, every single one of us have been driving in traffic and been cut off, or you've been with somebody that gets really upset, or somebody, whatever, honks at them, whatever it is. And like, there is not a day in my life that I don't always tell myself that could be a pregnant woman in that car trying to get to the hospital. That could be someone whose child just collapsed and they're laying down in the back seat and they're trying to get, it could be their worst day. It's not about you. But my point is, you can be in traffic. You can be with your children. You can be with your friends. You can be with your community. You can be with your work. And every time you come into a frame of mind where you're not feeling that you're really living out to be the best part of yourself you can be, it's a chance to practice it. It's a chance to say, here it is. I'm aware it's showing up. I don't like how this is showing up. What can I do to get myself out of this and start changing the way I think? And that's what I want to encourage people. It's about the baby steps and the little things and practicing all those things. And then it gets easier and easier and easier to do it when the big things happen.
I love that. And it kind of comes back in a way to the way you practice gratitude, right? So if you talk about positive psychology basics and so practicing gratitude, again, often people are like, well, I didn't have that big monumental event today to look at. And it could be even something that was negative, but you were grateful that the way you responded. I'm so grateful that when that event happened, that I was able to send compassion and grace and maintain my equanimity and my peace in the midst of whatever. So there's so many opportunities for us. Again, I remember when, as an alcoholic, right? So when I was getting sober around 30, so I was behind the eight ball in many ways, right? I really hadn't built a career. I was doing a lot of different things. And so at that time, I remember feeling like in order to build a life, I had to have this like radical thing, right? I was going to go from 0 to 100. And that was the way that I had to do it. And so for a little while, that was my intention. And as a 60-year-old, I look back and like everything great I've built in my life has been tiny little incremental things that have been compounded on top of each other. I can't look back at some time and go, and that was the day that, everything came in line.
That's that high five thing. It's all along the way.
Yeah, you're high-fiving because there's a tiny little things. And again, the gratitude is your high five. I'm grateful that this happened. I'm grateful. And the habits, I think, is so important. Again, if you look at the Prism, it's the whole bottom part is really habits. It's around, what's your nutrition, what's your exercise, what's your positive psychology. Are you building your life so you have a lot of flow in there? So it's all like you're making choices and you're building that. And then once it's set up, you're just kind of doing it, right? And so let's say fitness, right? And so we're exercising or whatever it happens to be. It's not that if you're going to be in great shape, you're like, and therefore I have to dedicate my entire life to it. You're like, no, just a little bit, just consistent, just consistent. And it's going to compound. It's going to get you where you want to be. And all of those things and the psychology piece, I like to think about the values in the positive psychology. Think about the values of compassion and love and kindness and connection and forgiveness. And those are the things, if you think about those things and you meditate on those things or you're mindful around those things, it shifts your beliefs because like you have strong beliefs in caring people, whereas somebody else might have strong beliefs in unfair people because they're interpreting the world that life is unfair, people aren't trustworthy, everybody's out for themselves. When you live that way, there will be a tremendous amount of evidence that you're right because that's what you're looking for. Yeah. And if you live with compassion and love and caring and empathy, and that's what you're seeing and expecting to see, that's what you're going to be surrounded by because that's what you're looking for. And so we have a choice that really determines how we're going to experience life. And again, it's the little things we're doing consistently and just kind of like a gardening, right? You're nurturing your life. You're like, what am I going to plant? How am I going to water this, right? And then it all sprouts and grows in a way that's, allows you to have a really rich, full, rewarding life. And again, like, we talked about your contributions. Another saying I love is you cannot outgive the universe. And so when you give, and you're that person, that it just comes back. And so it's such a, so many times, I don't know if you were referencing the book, but you're kind of talking about it in a way, the Give and Take. You ever read that one, Adam Grant's?
No.
So anyway, you were referencing his points. He maybe stole it from you, but the idea that that's what happened. So when you're giving, his thesis of the book is, who wins, givers or takers? And the idea is that short term, like in a singular transaction, a taker might win, right? Because they're looking to win in that transaction.
The battle, not necessarily the war.
Yeah, they're gonna win that battle. They're gonna get that one individual thing. But who wins over time is what he calls smart givers. And the distinction is not blind givers. Blind givers continue to give into places where it's just sucked away, right? So if you're giving to that person that's taking, they're not actually contributing back. And so just be conscious. Like you said, I had these friends and I poured into them. And so if one of them was like, you're like, I'm spiraling, and they're like, well, that's on you, Katherine. Like, okay, note for next time. Don't really need to be pouring into this person because there's so many people that are going to pour back.
Yes.
That absolutely. The idea is like, give and allow it to expand, and then it gets bigger for everyone. So.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And it's not keeping score.
Right.
Like it's not thinking that it's equal. Like I will get exactly back exactly what I give this person. It's developed. And you know what? I'm really glad you brought that up, because I would say that is the one thing that I am working the most on right now at this phase in my life. I've had a lot of awareness around forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And it's like one of those things where, I've developed so much in so many other in my life. I can just hold on to hate for a few people. I can just, like, that can be my one free hall pass.
Yeah.
No. And so, and in a couple of the circumstances in my life, it is requiring, I'll call it radical forgiveness. Right. And at the end of the day, you kind of realize, like, you might not get out of that one person what you need or want. And what comes to mind for me, and maybe I just watch too many prison dramas, but it's like when there's been a parent whose child gets killed by someone, and they sit down face to face with the murderer and look at them and say, I forgive you. And, any of us who witness that, usually the first reaction is something like, I could never do that, or I never would do, whatever. Right.
Because holding on to that grudge is really going to, they're going to feel that.
Right. It's going to bring my child, but it's going to whatever. It's going to change it. And I think for me, it's like kind of realizing that that's kind of where I am now in my life, where it's realizing that it might not be equal in every, like, either relationship or situation or even every season. But what's so important is that I continue to develop and genuinely mean and work toward being able to radically forgive, like, people in my life, and knowing that that is just a much healthier and better way of thinking, and a better way to put yourself out into the world every day and continue to develop these good habits. And so that's why I kind of say I feel like it's really a lifelong journey. It doesn't end. Even if you feel like you really kind of mastered a certain section of your life, you always find, oh, well, gosh, I really still suck. That's what I need to.
So one of the people you need to forgive also is yourself, but you don't want it to end. It's, I always look at you again. So even the idea of retirement, like, if you if we're in a position, which we are, and many of the people that will be listening are, to create our lives based on our gifts and our talents and our passions, what do you retire to? Right? If you've built your life around the things you love to do,
like, what do you retire to? You're already doing it.
You're already doing it, right? You're doing it. And so I think that's a key piece there. And then when you talk about the forgiveness piece that I think I'm just going to hit on, they have shown through EEG testing that is the biggest contributor to your peace is forgiveness. That is the big thing. Like when they do almost like they do meditation, right? And see like parts of your mind that are opening up, and forgiveness is the big one. And so
I didn't know that, but I sensed it. I could feel it within me.
See, I have to read all these books. It all comes intuitively to you.
Yeah, whatever. No.
But I think that's a really great piece. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because anytime we're holding on to grudges, essentially we're going back to our beliefs and we're making up a story about how some fraction we're focusing on the negative, and it's just never going to make your life any better. But I want to say that you've made my life a lot better, and I had so much fun with you today. Thank you so much for being with us. And
I have like tears of joy. You've made my life better in every way too. And thank you for sharing your time with me, and for anyone listening that can benefit. And I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful for you. And I just literally adore you. Thank you so much.
You too. Great to see you. And let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
All right. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.